Hi there, it's Jeanette. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a new video for Whimsy Stamps and it features their clear stamp set called Hugs Bunny. I have used one of the images and one of the sentiments that come from the stamp set. There are several and I think they all pair beautifully together. I was inspired by a card by DT member Andrea where she paired this image with the formal Lattice stencil, and I thought it looked so beautiful together, so I was inspired to use the two together. I'm going to link her card below this video on YouTube so you can see her beautiful card. I wanted to watercolor these images because I just love the very soft effect you get when you use watercoloring. So I used Zig Clean Color Real Brush Markers. Here is the list of everything I use, so you can use this as a reference if you wish, and we'll get to the coloration. So I used Bristol Strathmore paper to stamp the image on. I used archival black ink, and then while it was still wet, I sprinkled some clear embossing powder over top and then heat emboss that. So all that does is give you a little bit of a lift to the line, and it just makes it a little easier to stay within the lines, and it also gives you a nice sort of dark impression if you do that. So I started off with that darker color, just very sparingly, and now I'm going over it with the lighter oatmeal marker, blending everything towards the center and still leaving quite a bit of the area white, but just making sure I'm blending that dark color so that I don't have any harsh lines. So the idea behind this is that after I blend these two colors together, I get sort of a graduated shadow. And then I'm going to take a paintbrush and some water and I'm going to finish the blending. So I have this paintbrush, and I'll link to it. It's really a nice paintbrush to use. And I have, you can't see it, but off to the side I have a glass of water and I have a paper towel. So if I get too much ink on my image or on my brush, I can just wipe it off with the paper towel. So we're just fast forwarding a little bit. The first bunny is done. The second bunny was done basically by just using that light shade. So I didn't use two shades of brown for the second bunny. I just used one. Here I noticed that I had missed the second arm of the first bunny, so I'm just filling that in. And I'll go ahead and just smooth out any lines that are on the image. Sometimes when the ink dries, you do get a little bit of a line. So if you just take a dampened paintbrush and run it over the image, you can soften out the line, and you can see I'm brushing off the excess ink on that paper towel. So I'm going to do the ear of the second bunny, and this is exactly how I did the first ear. So I'm using 3 colors, blending them together, darkening it up a little bit, and then I will take my paintbrush and I will just gently blend those 3 together so it's nice and soft and smooth. I forgot to do the tail over here as well, so I'm just sort of dabbing the ink on and then softening it a little bit, but I wanted it to look a little bit textured. And then once everything looks great on the bunnies, I'll move on to the scarf. So again, just using that darker shade, blending it with the lighter shade, and then completing the whole blend using a paintbrush. I really like these markers because they have such a fine tip, so I tend to be able to keep the ink exactly where I want it to be. So I'm just finishing off the blend there, making sure it is nice and smooth. I think that is like the biggest tip I can give you about watercoloring, is just to make sure as you're coloring that you're making everything look smooth, because once it dries, it is a little bit harder to smooth it out. So I'm going to work on the hearts now, and I ended up using 4 colors just to get like the nice depth of color at the bottom of the hearts, and then gradually soften up as they move to the top of the heart. And I will take a damp paintbrush and just blend them a little bit. I decided that the bunnies, they sort of looked like they were floating a little bit. So I thought I better ground the bunnies. So I did that by using a couple of sort of gray colored markers. You're going to see that in a minute. I'm just going to draw some lines, some shadow lines underneath the bunnies. And this was the first marker I used, the shadow mauve. It ended up looking a little too blue, a little too light. So I went in with a little bit of blue-gray, which is much darker. And then I was able to take my paintbrush and just blend that out so it's nice and soft. You still see the lines. It still makes the bunnies look grounded, like they're standing on something and not floating. But I didn't want it to be too stark. I wanted it to be really soft. So I just made sure that both, sort of on both sides of the bunnies, that the ground started at the same height. And then I just blended everything off so that you can't see where it starts and where it finishes. Well, you can see where it starts. You can't see where it finishes. Then I took my embossing gun here just to heat it up a little bit, dry it up before I moved on to the next step. So I'm going to secure the actual paper to my mat, and then I'm going to secure the stencil over top of that so that everything is going to stay put and not shift around. Then I took some distress ink in Tumbled glass, which is a very, very light sort of aqua blue color. And I'm using this little finger sponge here. This allows me to be more precise when I'm going around the image. I didn't feel like masking the image, but you can go around it with this and not touch the image at all and just sort of get close enough to give a beautiful sort of background. And you can see as I'm working upwards, I am really, I'm not putting any more ink on, and it's just gradually blending to a much lighter color. So when I go back to the other side of this bunny, I did ink up a little bit more so it would be darker at the bottom, and again, just gradually fade off. So that when I remove the stencil, the background is sort of like an ombre effect almost. So you can see how pretty that looks. You could definitely, keeping the stencil put, you could actually have another color coming in from another corner if you wished. Now I'm going to create the card base, which is just cutting a piece of standard cardstock in half and then scoring each of those pieces in half. I like to use the Score Buddy, but I do like to use this Teflon bone folder. I just find it's more precise and gives a crisper edge to my card. Now, because this was exactly the same size, I had to trim off just a 1/4 inch so that it sits nicely on the card. And then I will just adhere it. Just making sure everything is nice and straight. Press it down. And then I thought I was going to be using these clear rhinestones on the card, but you're going to see later on I do change my mind. I did go in with a Prismacolor light gray pencil just to deepen up the shadow there. It kind of got a little bit lost after I inked the tumble glass on top. And then I thought it would be really sort of magical if there was a bit of sparkle. So I'm taking some stickles, and I'm not quite sure which one this is because I ended up using like almost the whole bottle. It was finished and I tossed the bottle without looking at the name, but it's one of the clear ones. And maybe it's Stardust, I'm not sure. And that is going to dry and just give some sparkle to the bottom of the card, which is really pretty. Now, because I did that, I felt like I needed just a few more pops of color. So I did pull out Whimsy's enamel dots, and I just tried to sort of match the colors that I used in my card, or the card base, and just scattered a few of the enamel dots of various sizes and various colors just up there in the top right hand corner, just so it didn't look so bare. So that's my card done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it inspires you to create a card using this beautiful stamp set. So until next time, have fun, happy crafting. And if you want to see the supplies I use, you can check below this video on YouTube, or you can check on my blog. Thanks for watching.